In this section, we're going to take a look at imprinting and splitting faces. I'm going to open up our part called Imprint and Split Face, and open it into SpaceClaim. Splitting faces is really helpful so you can apply different meshes, boundary regions, or supports on just a portion of a face instead of the entire face that's there. In this section, we're going to be looking at three main tools for doing this. Under the Intersect group, we'll be looking at the Split Face tool, which lets you select a face and split it. We'll be looking on our Sketch tool, which is Face Curve. This lets you free-form sketch on a face. And the third tool, under the Prepare tool, is going to be our Imprint tool. This takes two solids, as long as the faces are coincident, it imprints the edges of one face onto the other face. Let's start by looking at the least precise technique, and that's going to be our Face Curve tool. When I click on this under Sketch, notice it lets me start selecting on the model and start sketching. As soon as I click on a face, it adds a point or a node to that, and I'm essentially sketching a spline on a face. Now you can switch between faces that are there, and when you click the starting point, it makes this complete spline. Now you can drag on these points and reposition them on your model, but notice if you go too far, if it gets too crazy, it might not actually be able to make this spline. And then it's going to show you that it doesn't exist anymore. So if you want it to be a little bit crazier, you'll have to have more spline points that are driving it. Whenever you're ready or finished, or you'd like it, you can click the check mark on your screen, or you could hit the Enter key on your keyboard. That splits these three faces on the model. So now you could apply this for maybe a drop test. You might want to split this region up. You just might want a higher mesh configuration on this area. Or maybe we're applying heat to only a certain portion of the model. Notice this technique is probably the least precise of the techniques and methods I'm going to show you, but it lets you really quickly split a face. The next tool we're going to be looking at is going to be the Split Face tool under the Intersect group. Now with the Split Face tool, you're going to have a lot of tool guides that are there. And let's look at these tool guides one at a time. The first tool guide that you'll have on the model, let's say I want to work on this face, and I'm going to click that on my model. This first tool is called a UV cutter point. So we start off by clicking the face we want to split, and then selecting on a UV to cut it with. Now as I hover around edges, you'll notice that I get a distance and a percentage. So if I wanted to cut this face in half along this edge, I could type in 50%, and that'll put our cutter line right in the center, and this splits into two faces of the same area. The next face that we can split with the next tool guide is called perpendicular cutter points. If I choose that, say I want to cut this top face, I have to hover over an edge, and whenever edge I hover over, it's going to make a cutter that's perpendicular to that edge. So notice as I move my cursor around this round edge, it's always cutting towards the center. It's always making this cutter perpendicular to the edge I'm hovering over. The next one is two cutter points. So if I wanted to cut this model from this point to the one on the other side of the model, notice I can click to snap to this point, and my second click will draw a straight line between those 2 points. So if I want to click on our second point here, I could split this face into two pieces to apply a better mesh there. I'm going to undo once. That's there. And I'm going to show you another thing as I'm splitting this. One technique that I use a lot to make sure that I'm actually on the end point of it is to snap and to type in a value. Because you can split a face starting on one edge, and I can click in the center of the model, and it's not going to split it all the way through. It's just going to imprint a line or an edge on that face. So to make sure that you're always going from point to point, notice we're always working with a percentage of the edge. I could type in 0%, which makes sure that I'm starting at this point. If I hover here, notice I'm at 92, 93, 94. If I type in 100%, I'll snap right to the other side. Make sure that I split this into two sections. Lastly, let's take a look at another way to split this model. What I'm going to do is I'm first going to turn off everything except the base by turning them off in the structure tree. Let's say I want to split this center face that's here. The last tool is it says select cutter face. This lets me take a face and cut it with another face. Notice this face extends outward and lets me cut this center face by this bottom face, cuts it straight across and splits it into two sections. This is really useful for simply extending a face and slicing with another face on the model. Now the other thing that's really useful with these tools that I'm showing you is that you can split multiple faces at the same time. For instance, remember this first split that I made, 50% along that edge? What I could have done is I could have selected 1, Control select 2, Control selected 3 faces, and split them at the same time. So if I split this 25% along this edge, I would split all 3 faces at the same time to nicely isolate that so that I apply a nice mesh to this area region. Now there's one more thing I want to show you with our splitting faces. I'm going to use the Imprint tool to do that. I want you to reverse this, turn off the base, and turn on the remaining components that are there. So turn on bolt, bearing, and shafts, and go to the Imprint tool under the Prepare tab. What this does is it finds the different areas where an edge on one face intersects with a face on the other face. I'm going to escape out of this to show you. If I hide this bearing, notice there is no lines or imprints on this green face. If I turn the bearing back on and click Imprint, what it's doing is imprinting the edge of this blue face onto the green one. Now what this will let me do is will let me create a continuous mesh, or just have the same area faces on each model. So just to show you, if I go back to the Select tool, this green part here has been split into different sections. And if I go to the Measure tool, under the Measure tab, area of this face is 51.2755 millimeters. If I show the bearing, the area of this face is 51.2755 millimeters. So what it does, it creates the exact same face on both models, so you can have a really nice mesh between them. I hope you've seen 3 different methods of splitting faces by using face curves, sketching directly on a face, using our split face tools to split faces by UV curves, perpendicular lines, 2 cutter points, and also the extended faces, and also our Imprint tool. Thank you for watching.